Today on Riffs, Beards, and Gear, we check out the Burier saturation plugin from Kit Plugins. Often, the secret sauce that gives any given mix its panache, its flavor, is selective use of saturation. Now, in the old days, before the digital computers, saturation was a normal, naturally occurring thing in the tape that was used to record audio. That was just a given. You couldn't turn it off and you couldn't take it out of your sound if you wanted to, but saturation is a distortion, but it's a very musical, very good sounding type of distortion, a variant of distortion, if I may. It's imperfect, and it adds a lot of dimension and depth to whatever it gets put on. Well, Kit Plugins has come out with the Burier saturation plugin, and it's free. So I am here in Logic. I have put together a quick mix. Now I'm going to start out by showing you what Burier sounds like on a few different things within the context of this very short tune, which I will play for you right now. That sounds great. I really love the energy that is being conveyed with this mix. This is a very, very simple mix. I've put this together just to show you Burier on a few different individual examples, which we will dive into right now. First, I'm going to turn off Burier on my stereo bus. I'm going to turn it off on the bass guitar, and I'm going to turn it off on the kick drum. Now I'm going to play you, it's also on my guitars. There we go. Okay, I'm going to play you the same mix, and all I did was turn off the saturation coming from Burier. Check this out. Now you'll notice a few different things when hearing this version of the mix with no saturation on it. It sounds pretty clean. It's a little too clean for my taste. Also, the kick drum and the general low end has kind of disappeared. Also, everything's a little bit more, there's a little bit more mids. There's a little bit more upper mids in everything, which, depending on the situation, you may want. In this particular situation, I do not want. There's a lot of buildup in the mids. So I'm going to start with my bass guitar. Now, my bass guitar track is a MIDI bass. It is punk bass from Submission Audio. And without the saturation, so I'm going to bring up Burier. Here's how it sounds without. I'm going to turn it on, and then we're going to go over what I am doing with Burier. Okay, so here's what I am hearing on my end with Burier, and the amount of bury I am doing is kind of cranking. I'm adding a lot of grit. I'm adding some low end, and it's also scooping out the mid range. So I'm going to start this at 0, and I'm going to bring it in as I play the bass line one more time. Now, I haven't done anything with the low cut or the high cut. These controls are self-explanatory, and they are very useful when using the mix knob. However, we have everything just as it is by default, full up or down, depending on if you're the cuts, but the mix is full up. So we are 100% affected with the Burier control. Now, this plays very, very nicely with the kick drum, which I will go ahead and close this out. And we are going to turn on the kick drum Burier instance. Now I'm adding just a little bit, but here's what it sounds like in the context of just my drums. Okay, so what are we hearing? For me, I'm hearing the bottom end, the low lows of that kick drum start to come through. It's also scooping out a little bit of the mid-range, which I do want in my kick drum. I don't want all the mid-range in the kick. I want to make room for the guitars. So we're going to play this one more time, and you're going to hear the kick drum just kind of disappear when I turn Burier off. Okay. Next, we are going to go to the guitars. Now the guitars, I would treat differently than the bass or, any of the low end instruments, the low end frequency intense instruments like the kick drum or the bass guitar. So I'm going to turn Burier on halfway through, and then we're going to isolate the guitars and then talk about what I'm doing. So again, that's taking away a little bit of mid-range, which I like. And also I'm using this low cut to kind of tune the low end of the guitars. Now I'm going to turn this off. We're going to play just the isolated guitars. And you're going to hear what's happening once this is isolated. Now, I was using the low cut to just kind of trim out some of the resulting low end. So I'm going to lower the low cut and I'm going to dial it up more than I would, and I'm going to dial it back down. So now that we got all of those instances on the drums, bass, and guitar, now let's move to the two-bus. I'm going to start the mix. I'm going to start the mix and I'm going to turn on Burier halfway through and listen for the changes, listen for that mid-range and the top end. So what is this doing for the overall mix? I'd like that it's kind of rounding off some of the top end from the cymbals and whatever top end may be coming from the bass guitar as well. Some of the clickiness. It's just making everything kind of nice and round, and it's kind of gluing everything together with a subtle amount of saturation. Now I want to point out that I have the mix below 50% and I have just a little bit of saturation being added, but again, a little goes a long way with saturation. So when you combine all of these elements together, you get a much livelier, more energetic mix using saturation. Definitely check out Burier from Kit Plugins. It's free. All you have to do is give them your email. There's no excuse not to have this in your toolbox of mix goodies, and I will link down below in the description if you would like to check it out for yourself. All the pickable links down below in the description. You've been wonderful. I've been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you liked the video you just watched, please consider subscribing. And if you want to further support me and what I do, consider using some of the affiliate links down below in the description of this video. Go on over to Sweetwater, buy yourself something, and help me out at the same time. It's a win-win for both of us.